Brigit of Kildare.
Saint Brigit of Kildare, also known as Brigit of Ireland, is one of Ireland's patron saints along with Patrick and Columba. Her name is also variously spelled as Brigid, Bridget, Bridget, Bríd, and Bríd, and she is sometimes known as Mary of the Gael. Irish hagiography makes her an early Irish Christian nun, abbess, and founder of several monasteries of nuns, including that of Kildare in Ireland, which was considered legendary and was highly revered. Her feast day is February 1st, formally celebrated as the Imbolc quarter day of the pagan Irish year, which marked the beginning of spring, lambing, lactation in cattle, etc.
Life story. Historicity.
In the controversy about the historical existence of Bridget that erupted in the last third of the 20th century, researchers noted that 11 people with whom Bridget is associated in her lives are independently attested in annalistic sources, sources that place her death at AD 523, in the Annals of Tigonarch and Chronicon Scotorum, and her birth at 451, calculated from the alleged age of 72 at death. The differing biographies written by different authors, giving conflicting accounts of her life, are regarded as having considerable literary merit in themselves. 3 of those biographies agree that she had a slave mother in the court of her father, Bridget, a king of Leinster. Some scholars suggest that believers syncretize Saint Brigid with the pagan goddess Brigid. According to medievalist Pamela Berger, Christian monks took the ancient figure of the mother goddess and grafted her name and functions onto her Christian counterpart.
Birth and early life.
Bridget may have been born in Dundalk, County Louth, Ireland. Because of the legendary quality of the earliest accounts of her life, there is much debate among many secular scholars and even faithful Christians as to the authenticity of her biographies. According to her biographers, her parents were Bridget, a pagan chieftain of Leinster, and Brocha, a Christian Pict and slave who had been baptized by Saint Patrick. Some accounts of her life suggest that Bridget's father was in fact from Lusitania, kidnapped by Irish pirates and brought to Ireland to work as a slave, in much the same way as Saint Patrick. Many stories also detail Bridget's and her mother's statuses as pieces of property belonging to Bridget, and the resulting impact on important parts of Bridget's life story. The Vita outline Bridget's early life. It says that Bridget's mother was a slave, and Bridget herself was born into slavery to a druid. From the start, it is clear that Bridget is holy. Before a name had been given to the infant, Bridget dreams of 3 clerics baptizing her. One of the clerics told her father, "Let Bridget be your name for the girl." When the druid tries to feed her, she vomits because he is impure. Bridget recognizes his impurity and finds a white cow with red ears to sustain her instead. As she grows older, Bridget performs many miracles, including healing and feeding the poor. Saint Bridget is celebrated for her generosity to the poor. According to one tale, as a child, she once gave away her mother's entire store of butter. The butter was then replenished in answer to Bridget's prayers.
Commitment to religious life.
The ceremony was performed, according to different accounts, by one or the other of the bishops. Mal, died 487, or Mac Gael, died c. 489, the location probably being in Mag Tulch, the present barony of Fartula, Company. Westmeath. Mel also granted her abbatial powers. She followed Saint Mel into the kingdom of Teithba, which is made up of sections of modern Meath, Westmeath and Longford. This occurred about 468. According to some sources, Bridget was ordained bishop by Bishop Mel at Mag Tulch, and her successors have always been given episcopal honour. Bridget's small oratory at Kildare, Kildare, became a centre of religion and learning, and developed into a cathedral city. She founded 2 monastic institutions, one for men, and the other for women, and appointed St. Conleth as spiritual pastor of them. It has been frequently stated that she gave canonical jurisdiction to St. Conleth, Bishop of Kildare, but, as Archbishop Healy points out, she simply selected the person to whom the Church gave this jurisdiction, and her biographer tells us distinctly that she chose St. Conleth to govern the Church along with herself. Thus, for centuries, Kildare was ruled by a double line of abbot bishops and of abbesses, the abbess of Kildare being regarded as superior general of the monasteries in Ireland. Bridget also founded a school of art, including metalwork and illumination, over which Conlith presided. The Kildare scriptorium produced the Book of Kildare, which elicited high praise from Giraldus Cambrensis, but which has disappeared since the Reformation. According to Giraldus, nothing that he had ever seen was at all comparable to the book, every page of which was gorgeously illuminated, and he concludes by saying that the interlaced work and the harmony of the colors left the impression that all this is the work of angelic, and not human skill. There is evidence in the Trias Thaumaturga for Bridget's stay in Connacht, especially in County Roscommon and also in the many churches founded by her in the Diocese of Elphin. Her friendship with St. Patrick is attested by the following paragraph from the Book of Armagh: Inter sanctum patricium Brigitanque Hibernium Columpnes amicitia caritatis inerat tanter, autonum coconsulamque haberant unum. Christus per illum illamque virtutes multis Brigit. Between St. Patrick and Brigid, the pillars of the Irish people, there was so great a friendship of charity that they had but one heart and one mind. Through him and through her Christ performed many great works.
Miracles associated with Bridget.
Miracles during Bridget's lifetime were commonly recorded by those who had witnessed them or had some relation to a person who had. In St. Bridget's case, most of her miracles were related to healing and domestic tasks usually attributed to women. If Bridget wished or predicted something to occur, then it came to pass. A few examples of her miracles are described below. When Bridget was of marital age, a man by the name of Duke Maculaga came to woo her. Since Bridget offered her virginity to God, she told the man that she cannot accept him but to go to the woods behind his house where he will find a beautiful maiden to marry. Everything that he says to the maiden's father will be pleasing to them. The man followed her instructions and it was as she said. Several of Bridget's miracles occurred on Easter Sunday. On this day, a leper had come to Bridget to ask for a cow. She asked for a time to rest and would help him later. However, he did not wish to wait and instead stated he would go somewhere else for a cow. Bridget then offered to heal him, but the man stubbornly replied that his condition allowed him to acquire more than he would healthy. After convincing the leper that this was not so, she told one of her maidens to have the man washed in a blessed mug of water. After this was done, the man was completely cured and vowed to serve Bridget. On another occasion, Bridget was traveling to see a physician for her headache. They were welcome to stay at the house of a Leinsterman. His wife was not able to have children that survived except for 2 daughters that had been mute since their birth. Bridget was traveling to Earth with the daughters when her horse suddenly startled, causing her to wound her head on a stone. Her blood mixed with the water here. Bridget then instructed one of the girls to pour the bloodied water onto her neck in God's name, causing the girl to be healed. The healed sister was told to call her sister over to be healed as well, but the latter responded that she had been made well when she bowed down in the tracks. Bridget told the cured sisters to return home and that they also would birth as many male children that their mother had lost. The stone on which Bridget had injured herself cured any disease of the head one had when they laid their head on it. One of the more commonly told stories of St. Brigid was when she went to the King of Leinster to ask for land to build a convent. She told the king that the place where she stood was the perfect place for a convent. It was beside a forest where they could collect firewood and berries. There was also a lake nearby that would provide water and the land was fertile. The king laughed at her and refused to give her any land. Bridget prayed to God and asked him to soften the king's heart. Then she smiled at the king and said, "Will you give me as much land as my cloak will cover?" The king thought that she was joking, and because Bridget's cloak was so small he knew that it would only cover a very small piece of land. The king agreed and Bridget spread her cloak on the ground. She asked her 4 friends to hold a corner of the cloak and walk in opposite directions. The 4 friends walked north, south, east and west. The cloak grew immediately and began to cover many acres of land. The king was astonished and he realized that she had been blessed by God. The king fell to the ground and knelt before Bridget and promised her and her friends money, food and supplies. Soon afterwards, the king became a Christian and also started to help the poor and commissioned the construction of the convent. Legend has it, the convent was known for making jam from the local blueberries which was sought for all over Ireland. There is a new tradition beginning among followers of Saint Brigid to eat jam on February 1st in honor of this miracle. It was also said that once an elderly woman appeared at her door begging for food and Brigid turned her down as the only piece of food she had in the house was a dish of butter. The old woman replied to Brigid saying even that would do. When Brigid turned away from the door she saw on the table 3 dishes of butter. It seemed that the Lord had rewarded her for her kindness. Brigid also performed miracles that included curse elements as well. When on the bank of Inny, Brigid was given a gift of apples and sweet sloes. She later entered a house where many lepers begged her for these apples, which she offered willingly. The nun who had given the gift to Brigid was irritated by this, saying that she had not given the gift to the lepers. Brigid was angered at the nun for withholding from the lepers and therefore cursed her trees so they would no longer bear fruit, rendering them barren. Yet another virgin also gave Brigid the same gift as the nun, and again Brigid gave them to begging lepers. This time the virgin asked that she and her garden be blessed. Brigid then said that a large tree in the virgin's garden would have 2-fold fruit from its offshoots, and this was done. After Brigid promised God a life of chastity, her brothers were grieved at the loss of a bride price. When she was outside carrying a load past a group of poor people, some began to laugh at her and others were displeased with her choice. A man named Basine said to her, "The beautiful eye which is in your head will be betrothed to a man though you like it or not." In response, Brigid thrust her finger in her eye and said, "Here is that beautiful eye for you. I deem it unlikely that anyone will ask you for a blind girl." Her brothers tried to save her and wash away the blood from her wound, but there was no water to be found. Brigid said to them, "Put my staff about this sod in front of you," and after they did, a stream came forth from the ground. Then she said to Basine, "Soon your 2 eyes will burst in your head," and it happened as she said. She is associated with the preservation of a nun's chastity in unusual circumstances. Some authors claim that it is an account of an abortion. Both Liam de Paon, 1993, and Connolly and Picard, 1987, in their complete translations of Cogitosis, give substantially the same translation of the account of Brigid's ministry to a nun who had failed to keep her vow of chastity, and become pregnant. In the 1987 translation,
Veneration in Ireland.
in modern Ireland, Mary of the Gael remains a popular saint, and Bridget remains a common female Christian name.
Shrines and relics.
It seems that Farfhart was the scene of her birth. Farfhart Church was founded by Saint Munin in honour of Bridget. The old well of Bridget's adjoining the ruined church still attracts pilgrims. At Armagh there was a templum Brigidis, namely the little abbey church known as Riggle's Brigid, which contained some relics of the saint, destroyed in 1179, by William Fitz-Alelm. Bridget was interred at the right of the high altar of Kildare Cathedral, and a costly tomb was erected over her adorned with gems and precious stones and crowns of gold and silver. Over the years her shrine became an object of veneration for pilgrims, especially on her feast day, February 1st. About the year 878, owing to the Scandinavian raids, Bridget's relics were taken to Downpatrick, where they were interred in the tomb of Patrick and Columba. The relics of the 3 saints were discovered in 1185, and on June 9 of the following year were reinterred in Down Cathedral. The Church of St. João Baptista at Lumia near Lisbon Airport in Portugal holds a relic claimed to be the skull of St. Brigid. A fragment of this skull was brought to St. Brigid's Church, Kilcurry in 1905 by Sister Mary Agnes of the Dundalk Convent of Mercy, and in 1928 another fragment was sent by the Bishop of Lisbon to St. Brigid's Church in Killester, in response to a request from Fathers Timothy Traynor and James McCarroll.
Motifs in art.
In liturgical iconography and statuary, St. Brigid is often depicted holding a reed cross, a crozier of the sort used by abbots, and a lamp, called a lamp of learning and wisdom, as lamps and fire were regarded sacred to the Celts and Druids. Early hagiographers portray St. Bridget's life and ministry as touched with fire. According to P. W. Joyce, tradition holds that nuns at her monastery kept a sacred eternal flame burning there. Light motifs, some of them borrowed from the Apocrypha such as the story where she hangs her cloak on a sunbeam, are associated with the wonder tales of her hagiography and folklore. In her lives, St. Brigid is portrayed as having the power to multiply such things as butter, bacon and milk, to bestow sheep and cattle and to control the weather. Plant motifs associated with St. Brigid include the white Lilium candidum, popularly known since medieval times as the Madonna lily for its association with the Virgin Mary, and the windflower anemone coronaria, called the Brigid anemone since the early 19th century. Kildare, Kildare, the Church of the Oak Quercus petraea, is associated with a tree sacred to the Druids. Her colour, white, was worn by the Kildare United Irishmen during the 1798 rebellion and is worn by Kildare sports teams.
Placinames.
Kilbride is one of Ireland's most widely spread placinames. There are 43 Kilbrides located in 19 of Ireland's 32 counties: Antrim, 2, Carlow, Cavan, Down, Dublin, Galway, Kildare, Kilkenny, 3, Leo, Longford, Louth, Mayo, 5, Meath, 4, Offaly, 4, Roscommon, 2, Waterford, Westmeath, 2, Wexford, 4, and Wicklow, 8, as well as 2 Kilbreedies in Tipperary, Kilbreedia and Toberbreda in Clare, Toberbredia in Kilkenny, Bridiswell Commons in Dublin, Bridestown in Temple Bredy in Cork and Rathbride and Brides Church in Kildare. Similarly, there are a number of placinames derived from Cnoic Bride, Bridget's Hill, such as Knockbridge in Louth and Knockbride in Cavan.
Namesakes.
Not all Kilbride or St. Bride's churches are directly associated with Bridget, the daughter of Dubdge. Cethran Saetín's History of Ireland 1841 edition edited by Dermot O'Connor lists 14 saints gleaned from the martyrologies and heroic literature, each called Brigid, and not including Brigit of Kildare. This dizzying abundance of Brigits had the effect of confusing those scholars in the 16th and 17th centuries who compiled the calendars from older manuscript sources, many of them now lost. For example, John Colgan states Brigit of Moyn was the daughter of Neman in one reference and the daughter of Idus in another. The Martyrology of Donegal, for example, lists Brigit daughter of Dioman, feast day May 21st, Brigit of Moyn feast day on March 9th, and what may be 5 more, Brigid the daughter of Leonin, associated with Killarney, feast day March 6th, Brigit of Selwyn, November 12th, Brigit of Kildare, feast day January 7th, and 2 other Brigits, feast days March 9th, the second Brigit of that date, and 30 Set.
Veneration beyond Ireland.
Church dedications, artwork, folklore and medieval manuscripts indicate the extent of the cult of Brigid in Western Europe. Alsace, devotion to Brigid dates to the 8th century. There are relics of the saint in the church of Saint Pierre-le-Vieux in Strasbourg, Belgium. A fragment of a medieval Irish shawl known as Saint Brigid's mantle is venerated at the Cathedral of Bruges, where the cultus of Brigid was introduced by its Irish bishop, Saint Foylan, died 655. There is a chapel, 7th–10th century, dedicated to Saint Brigid at Fosses-la-Ville, a church in Liege and an altar in Hesse, Brittany. The Church of Saint Denis in Saint Omer is the best known of over 30 church and chapel dedications to Brigid. She is venerated in folklore as midwife to the Blessed Virgin Mary and protectress of cattle. A Paulton is held at Morima each year. Cologne, 4 parish churches and 7 chapels are dedicated to Brigid and a relic is preserved at the Great Street Martin Church. A church dedicated to Saint Brigid was destroyed in the Napoleonic period. There was also a chapel dedicated to her in Mainz, England. St. Bride's Church in the City of London was rebuilt in 1672. Italy, Donatus of Fiesole compiled the metrical life of Brigid and built a church in Piacenza, 9th century, which was donated to the Irish Order of the Monastery of St. Columbanus, in Bobbio. The church, and the attached hospital, sheltered predominantly Irish pilgrims moving to Bobbio and on to Rome. It still exists. The cult of Saint Brigid is particularly important in northern Italy, Piacenza, Como, Valbrembana etc., Netherlands. Saint Brigid is the patron saint of the Dutch city of Ommen, Portugal. Brigit's skull, preserved in the Church of São João Baptista in Lumia, was traditionally venerated on February 2 and in former times was carried in procession as a sacred instrument in the blessing of children and animals throughout the parish, in a ceremony called the Bencao do Gado, blessing of the cattle. Spain, a cult of Brigid at Olite in Navarre was introduced from Troyes and Picardy in northern France around 1200 and a church is dedicated to her in Seville, Switzerland. A sacred flame, the Lumen Sancti Brigidae, was tended at Liestal in the 13th century and there is a chapel dedicated to her in the city of St. Gallen. Saint Bridget, in the alternative spelling of her name, Bríd, was patron saint of the powerful medieval Scottish House of Douglas. The principal religious house, and mausoleum of the Earls of Douglas and latterly Earls of Angus being St. Bride's Kirk, Douglas. Another Saint Brigit of Sweden, 1303–1373, was given a Swedish variant of the Old Irish name named in honor of Bridget. United States, in St. Joseph, Minnesota, there is double monastery dedicated to St. Bridget, known as the St. Brigit of Kildare Methodist Benedictine Monastery.
Placenans outside Ireland.
Bridget-related names in Scotland and England include several Bridewells or Bridiswells, commemorating in their names the presence of a sacred well dedicated to Bridget or her pre-Christian antecedent, East Kilbride, West Kilbride, Kilbride, Bridiswell, Temple Bride and Tubber Bride, derived for the word for well, Tobar in Irish or Gaelic. These Brigidin sites include the original Bridewell Palace in London which became synonymous with jail houses through the English-speaking world. Kilbride and St. Bride's in Newfoundland, Canada are named in her honour.
Relics.
Brigit's skull has been preserved in the Igreja São João Baptista, Church of St. John the Baptist, in Lumia in Portugal, 38 Deg 4629 N 9 Deg 0955 E/38.77460 DEG N 9.165226 DEG E/38.77460 9.16526. Near the Lisbon airport, since 1587 and is venerated on February 2, not February 1, as in Ireland. St. Brigid's head was reputedly carried to King Denis of Portugal in 1283 by Irish knights travelling to the Aragonese Crusade. The inscription on the tomb in Lumia reads:
Western liturgy.
Various continental breviaries of the pre-Reformation period commemorate Bridget, and her name is included in a litany in the Stowe Missal. In the 2004 edition of the Roman Martyrology, Bridget is listed under February 1 with the Latin name Brigidae. She is cited as follows: at Kildare in Ireland, Brigid, who founded one of the first monasteries in Ireland and, together with St. Patrick, began the work of evangelization. Thus Brigid is officially recognized by the Vatican as a first millennium saint, recognized by popular acclaim, rather than ever being formally canonized.
Eastern liturgy.
Bridget is highly venerated by many Eastern Orthodox Christians as one of the great Western saints before the schism between the Eastern and Western churches. Her feast day, as in the West, is February 1, although churches following the Julian calendar, as in many Orthodox countries, celebrate her feast on February 14, the corresponding date on the Julian calendar. The troparion to her is in tone 1. The corresponding comtakion is in tone 4. According to the tradition of the Orthodox Church, Saint Bridget lost one of her eyes which saved her from being married against her will as related in the first and second troparia of the fourth ode of the canon of the saint from the Orthodox Matins service. In another version of the legendary story of Saint Bridget losing her eye, she suffered an eye disease making her lose one eye. In the book Saint Bridget by Ian MacDonald, Saint Bridget had an eye disease. She put her finger under her eye and plucked it out of her head so that it lay on her cheek, and when Duch and her brethren beheld that, they promised that she should never be told to go to a husband except for the husband whom she should like. Then Saint Bridget prayed to God, put her palm to her eye, and it was healed at once.